Hi, my name's Ian Lees and I've been involved in Westmill Wind Farm since 2005 and I became aware of it through the work of Energy for All, and because of that I became a board member in 2007 and stayed as a board member until 2019. I've been involved with renewable energy and energy efficiency since 1985, and by the early 2000s there was no doubt at all that in order to get wind farms built in this country we were going to have to adopt the approach that had been successfully used and in fact gave the Danish tremendous wind companies etc export around the world. And the reason was they involved communities from the beginning. And then I heard about an opportunity that you were going to build a community wind farm here where I live, and I thought, I've got to practice what I preach, I must get involved. So I became a shareholder, joined the board, and one of my first jobs when I joined the board was actually to become chair of a working group to set up the Westmill Sustainable Energy Trust. And that was a really great experience, and as it's going so successfully today, I think it has been a great success.
Hello, my name's Liz Rothschild and I got involved with Westmill essentially because Adam Twine, my partner, was the person that set up the whole idea in the first place, but also for my own reasons because I'm absolutely passionate about the need for these kind of projects to take place and happen. Adam started the idea of having this project here at Westmill and that it should be community owned. He was always absolutely passionate about the fact that that's how it should be. And I watched him struggling for years and years and years to try to get this planning permission through, and I began to realise that we couldn't do it on our own. And so we came up with the idea of Wind Power over Westmill, as we called it, WOW, which was really the first time that we'd said help. Help. If we're going to make this happen, it needs more of us to get engaged and involved, because the opposition were very loud spoken and appearing to gain ground. And so that group was formed, and really it's exciting to think about the fact that so many of those members have remained loyally involved right up to the present day. Something was forged there as we worked together to make this happen at Westmill.
I'm Nan Pratt, and I became involved with this wonderful place through Adam Twine, whom I met on one cold evening, an empty field. He was excited and hoping to put up these 5 turbines. I got so excited I invited my lovely friend to join in too.
And I'm Penny Hockley. Nan is a friend of mine in the village in Strevenham. I had had a medical problem which had changed life a bit, and I was no longer able to drive and able to work from home. And she saw the chance, knowing that I was interested in sustainable energy, she saw the chance of me doing an administrative job with Westmill.
I was originally a geography teacher and thoroughly enjoyed it, best subject ever. And I became very, very interested in global climate change, and which really I thought this is something cataclysmic that needs to be done. So when I heard there was the possibility of a wind farm coming close by, I was I thought this was something I could get involved with.
Hello, I'm Adam Twine. I farm here at Westmill, and I was the person who had the initial idea for trying to have a wind farm up on this site. So this is an airfield. It's an arable field. It's full of corn and stuff like that. And I'd started farming. I've been farming for years. I was looking to diversify my farm income streams. I had been engaged with the nuclear power, opposition to nuclear power in the late 70s and all through the 80s. So I had interest in soft energy paths. And when I was looking at this site, which is an old wartime airfield, very flat, very open to the southwest, very exposed, on a bit of a ridge, I thought, wow, what could we do here? And various ideas came up. One was looking at for a festival site, so we did have some festivals up here, and another one was looking at the possibility of having a wind farm. I think at that point there were no wind farms in the UK, although Peter Edwards at Delabole put one up a few years later, another farmer, first one I think. I was very clear I wanted to be a community model if possible. There were none in the UK then. Denmark had community-owned wind turbines. They'd pioneered that concept with local communities, often local 4 or 5 farmers getting together and putting up a couple of turbines, something like that. And that just seems such an obvious. I have an interest in social justice issues and sort of empowerment, so that felt like a nice way of bringing those together with, as a land steward, having that opportunity to do something with my own land as well.
It was a wonderful moment the first time we sat around the kitchen table and we looked at all these faces and all these people who'd come because they wanted to see this happen, including people who hadn't necessarily known what they thought about it until they went to a public meeting and became convinced that yes, this was the right direction of travel. So there was a huge uplift of energy at that point, but I don't think any of us dreamed that it would take us 17 years to achieve it.
Planning was the big one, so that from which I undertook, because until you've got planning you haven't got any possibility, and then there's the practicalities of having enough wind and stuff like that. And then later on it was raising the money and the community ownership bit. So the planning was the one which took many years. It was quite complicated, as you can imagine. There were no wind farms in South East England at that point. And no one understood the idea of community ownership because, everyone thought it was a bit of a scam or had no idea what it was about really. And to be fair, I never really expected it to happen because there were none and I couldn't see how I could do it.
This is probably the prejudice of a partner here speaking, but I sat and in public meeting after public meeting and I watched people lambasting Adam and he always remained calm and positive and profoundly well informed. And I think that quiet dignity really was part of what began to change hearts and minds. And I remember hearing a story from Colin Bell, who was one of the early members of WOW and then was part of WeSET. And he went to the public meeting in Shrivenham with a completely open mind. He didn't know what he thought about this idea of having a wind farm up here, so he came to listen. And he was convinced by what he heard from Adam at that meeting, but he was also really devastated by the degree of opposition that he heard in the room and the virulence of opposition. And at the end of the meeting, the chair proposed a vote, a show of hands in the room about what people thought about the proposal. And Colin was at this meeting with a lot of his neighbours, and he wasn't entirely confident about whether he wanted to say he was in favour because he had this horrible feeling he might be the only one in the room. But he decided, no, I'm convinced, I'm going to put my hand up. And when he did, he looked around and he discovered that the hands that were in favour were in the majority. And I think that's a really remarkable story to hold on to because, you often can feel as though things are not going your way. But actually, be brave, because if you step up over the parapet, you might find a lot of other people stepping up with you. And that's what he discovered. And Colin went on not only to be a core member of Wind Power over Westmill, but also he was involved in WeSET and helped organise numerous things with us.
8 years it took to get the planning permission. And then there was the various kits were not available, and we finished up not with the machines that we had wanted, but anyway, they have proved to be tried and trusted, and in fact, although they're branded Siemens, they're actually Danish, made in Denmark machines. So they've been fairly reliable. So it's all been not plain sailing, but it has got better.
Oh, it was definitely an uphill struggle. The most commonly held attitude was that climate change might well not be happening, and if it was, it certainly wasn't anything to do with something that human beings might be doing. So you had that to start with, and then in addition you had the fact that wind turbines were completely ineffective. They couldn't actually do anything to help the situation, and there were rumours going around that they took more energy to produce than they would ever generate in their lifetime. Extraordinary fallacies. There were leaflets that went out into the local village saying that the turbines would be louder than a pop group in summer and you'd have to have your windows closed. So we were up against a massive amount of misinformation, which was actually one of the things that surprised me, that it was quite a dirty campaign really from the opposition. It wasn't based on fact. It was emotional, very emotional.
It's meant learning a whole load of skills, making connections with a whole load of other people, and I had probably a bit of a naive faith that it would probably something would happen, and which was lucky because there were many times when it could not have happened and it would have been sensible. And I had a budget of, I can't think what it was. I think I allowed myself was it like 15 grand over 5 years is what I thought I could, I had a business, I had an existing business, I could on the back of that, and we went hugely over budget, but we were so far in that we either had to write it off or keep going. I sold a bit of land to make it, to finance it when it got really tough, and I hadn't got any more money.
Our passion was to get people educated and inspired, and it's both really, and that's what led eventually to the forming of WeSET, Westmill Sustainable Energy Trust, and it's interesting really when I think back on the first membership of the group, because we really were divided between those with a huge amount of technical expertise, knowledge about the wind industry, and people who came from an education and an arts background, and I think we really needed both, because when you're reaching out to different kinds of groups of people, there's different ways you need to use to reach them.
The biggest problem we had was that the wind speeds were not as good as what the prospectus said and what Garad Hassan had told us they were going to be. And this is not uncommon in the projections. I think they've improved a lot since then, but these were early projections and they weren't as good. So despite the fact that we've not had the wind speeds we've wanted, people have been able to earn about 3.5% on average interest each year since we started, which is an awful lot better than what you would get in an ISA today.
The share offer was put out, and that, I think, won over a lot of the local people because they could actually belong, they could take part in it, they could buy shares, they could become part of it, far more interested, and certainly the interest went to the school children because the local schools were invited to name a turbine, and that really won people over. People travel down the road and they say, "Oh, Gusty Gizmo is not working, Mummy. What's wrong?" And that really has involved the public a great deal.
From the beginning, we knew we wanted to set up a Westmill Sustainable Energy Trust, and we wanted it to tackle a whole series of things. Have lots of site visitors here. As
the visits coordinator, of course, I came across all the people initially who wanted to come and see. And there was the open day when the general public came, which was wonderful. They were always very well supported.
One of the things I really enjoyed in the early days was bringing councillors and council officials here, because they would all say the same thing. They'd come here, they'd drive in, they'd get next to a turbine and say, "Oh, it's a lot bigger than I thought." And then the second thing they would say, "It's not as noisy as I thought." So that was getting people familiar with what a wind farm looks like, that it isn't noisy, that it's not obtrusive, it doesn't take up an amount of space, etc., etc. So that was brilliant. So visits was important.
And the best, I think, was one occasion when I was asked to take round a family from Nigeria. Grandad had come over and he wanted to supply power for his village. His son, who was living in England, brought his two sisters, and my neighbours wondered why one weekend I was whisked away in two very shiny black cars. They wondered where I was going. I was coming up here to introduce them to wind and solar power. And Grandad was absolutely determined to introduce panels and a turbine to his village in Nigeria. Wonderful.
The other thing was, of course, education, the curriculum, and getting visits from schools, obviously, and we've got some regular visitors from the same schools, which is great. All of it was about education, awareness, and look, come and see.
One of my favourite stories to tell children, to make them realise that not only is this electricity that they can use at home and switch on their light with, I tell them that Turbine 2, Gusty Gizmo, before it was erected, it was lying on the ground and the turbine blades were on the ground. They were of very special shape and very beautiful. And I went up to the end of it and I stroked it. So on there are my fingerprints. And so that little bit of that turbine is mine, I say. And so when I switch on my television, my electricity is coming from there. And they love that story, and it makes them feel very, very close to the fact that they belong here.
And that's why it was so important that the schools named the turbines, and 5 local schools each possess one of the turbines. The energy that's used in order to produce the energy that we want to use is, of course, the fuel. It needs fuel. And nature's free gift is the wind for the turbines and the light for the panels. It doesn't even need strong sunlight. It's the light that the panels need. And consequently, nature's free gift is producing something that we all so badly want to use. What would we do without a light switch on?
Now we can show these projects, we can show what they're generating, and people are beginning to see increasing evidence. You know, it used to be so possible for people to still dismiss the idea that climate change was happening. Now there's hardly anybody that does that. So from that starting point, then you can draw people nearer into saying, look, this is what we can do, and if we work together, there's so much more we can do. You know, this isn't an individual problem, it's a communal problem, and it's an opportunity.
I really enjoy the fact that I have invested something in something that is going to be a continuation. It's not going to stop. My investment has been very well rewarded, and I feel that I've done something useful. It really is. And it's a lovely place to visit.
And it's not going to stop. We've started something, people love coming here, people love to know that it's local electricity, and that's going to happen more and more. And it's brilliant to be in the vanguard of something that's going to roll on and roll on. And the world will roll on as well because of it.
I guess I just feel incredibly proud of what we've achieved here, actually, and amazed. And if I'm absolutely honest, I don't know if I'd have had the staying power that Adam demonstrated to get to where we got now. Because seriously, he worked practically 20 hours a day for years in order to achieve this.
Long hours, probably, yeah. The long hours was I was doing 2 jobs for years, which has an impact on the rest of your life, as you can imagine. So yeah, very long hours, and I guess that's where the sort of the belief and believing it's important is makes it worthwhile.
And I think it's important to say that. It's important to understand what all the group contributed, but it's important to also understand what it takes some key individuals at the beginning of projects like this, what they have to put in to make something like this arrive. And now it's extraordinary to think of all the people that are involved, and indeed I'm not involved so much in the day-to-day now, and it's exciting to see a whole new generation of people coming in because they've been drawn to it, and yeah, this is what we need, isn't it? We need more and more and more of this. At one point we were generating the most community-owned energy in the whole world. And now, isn't it fantastic that we aren't anymore, because there are so many other projects out there that are doing even more.